and welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. As always, I am joined by Nathan Rayner. And, well, if the podcast continues in this way for the rest of the season, you're going to have two very, very happy hosts because, yet again, we're back. We've got more signings to talk about, more exciting rumours, and more importantly, another Boro win. Of course, off the back of an impressive victory at Carrow Road. We spent the weekend together, didn't we, Nathan? A bank holiday celebration of Rob Edwards' Middlesbrough Invincibles. I probably have said that far too early, but give us the chance to get carried away. So yeah, as I usually say, you can tell if you're watching on YouTube from the two smiles on our faces. We've had a lovely weekend. Far too many beers. We couldn't record yesterday for that exact reason, so we're recording on Monday morning. And yeah, Nathan, I can't wait to get into it, to be honest. We've got plenty to talk about.
Yeah, and it was the first time I think ever that we've actually sat and watched a game together, like actually like in a living room and watched it and being able to sort of gasp at some shocking passes and things like that and give each other chew for certain agendas that we both push. But yeah, it was very nice to sit down and be able to watch the game. Obviously, 3 points is a massive, massive bonus. And yeah, it was the cherry on top of a good bank holiday weekend that we've had.
Yeah, it certainly was. It certainly was. So, as I say, there is lots to get into. We're going to try and do it in chronological order as we have been doing, at least whilst the transfer window's been open. So, we'll go right the way back to Monday, the open training session. I got it right, Nathan. I did, well, I guess I get half a point because I said Nypan will be announced at the open training session. He wasn't announced there, but he was getting photos with everyone. It was confirmed a day later. And what I will say is I went through the last podcast calling him Nypan. It's quite obviously not that. It's Nypan, we now know. But regardless, he's through the door. We did discuss it obviously last week in terms of his profile, what he's going to bring, the fact that he does have so much expectation on his shoulders already. And yeah, a nice one to have confirmed early on in the week. And then followed straight up by my favourite type of transfers. You don't hear a peep, and then he's just appeared at an under 23s game, and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, very strange one, wasn't it? Monday with first of all the open training session and all the photos with Sverre, our Norwegian, and obviously we got confirmation the day after. Rob Edwards also in his presser this week saying that he's definitely an attacking midfield player rather than one that would sit in the two where Hackney and Morris would sit. So that's interesting to sort of understand where he will fit in this Borough team. At the minute playing 3-4-2-1, those two 10 positions are really important. So having another body in there is really good, especially with what we'll get onto a little bit later. But then yeah, the evening after the open training session, under 23s game or under 18s, I can't remember, against Man United. And the rumour mill was in full swing that there was a big centre half in the director's box with Rob Edwards, Kieran Scott, Chris Jones, the head of recruitment. So you're thinking, surely not. Like, there's been no links to anyone. And then all of a sudden, full time whistle is blown at the Riverside and a photo appears on social media and in the forums of exactly what has been described. Big centre half. No one has a clue who he is. So everyone's doing their utmost due diligence to try and figure out who it is. We had a few details in terms of his height and his build, his position, and that he was from the MLS. So understanding all those and piecing the puzzle together, we landed on Adilson Malanda, and it sort of came out on the forums as well on the Monday night that he'd be signing, but he will be going back to Charlotte FC on loan for the rest of the MLS season before coming here for maybe a month from the back end of November through December and then being available for selection in the January. So and a big deal as well. Looking at it, I think it's been the most money that we've spent on a signing in a good while, really. Near enough £6 million for a centre half that's not going to be here till January. It's a big investment,
Certainly is.
but it appears that he has got a lot of potential about him. He had a lot of potential suitors higher up in Europe.
PSV,
PSV,
yeah, were the ones mentioned, weren't they?
yeah, yeah, and I think from what I can understand, that was all but done, and then they instead pulled the plug and signed a lad from Valencia who was a little bit younger than Malanda, but he certainly looks like a very big unit and a very promising signing from everything that we've seen so far. And obviously, we're recording this on Bank Holiday Monday. Charlotte FC played last night. They got a clean sheet, seventh win on the bounce, and big Adilson, man of the match.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it already. I'm sure a lot of people listening probably have seen it or will have seen the clips going around social media. Bit of a slightly different version of man of the match in the MLS. He gets sort of marched into the crowd and gets a crown put on his head. I mean, I'm not sure about that, but if he carries on the man of the match performances, I'm all on board with that. Like you say, though, there was, by all accounts, a lot of interest in this one. And as you say, I think managing to get it over the line is a major coup. But the fact that Middlesbrough have been able to do this deal is largely down to the fact that they were basically in agreement that he could finish the season with Charlotte. Now, I get a lot of people are kind of the opinion, well, how can we spend this much money on a centre back and not be able to use him until January? For the most part, this summer, the kind of narrative that's been getting pushed is, we're trying to be self-sustainable, this, that, and the other. Well, yes, I think in terms of, and buzzword alert, I'm going to say model. In terms of the model, Middlesbrough have done so well basically over the last few years. And of course, there's a whole situation and narrative around, well, you can't just keep on selling players. And I'm not going to dive into that. But in terms of the success of what Middlesbrough have tried to do over the last few years and build something, I think the recruitment team, Kieran Scott, Chris Jones, as you mentioned, deserve a hell of a lot of praise because they've put Middlesbrough in a position where we can basically afford to do deals like this. And we are, through the signing of Nypan, through the signing of who we're going to get onto a little bit later in terms of who we've been linked with, it is quite clear now that Middlesbrough are viewed through the lens of the whole footballing world as a perfect club to make that next step in your career. And I certainly never want Middlesbrough to be a stepping stone, but more often than not, you are seeing Middlesbrough mentioned and really punching above their weight a little bit in terms of competing with these clubs to get loan signings or like the signing of Milanda, where Middlesbrough have managed to financially put themselves in a position through developing players and then selling them on for higher fees and making profit, but also just the development of players giving people that opportunity to go and flourish and then say, okay, well, give us 1 or 2 years and then you can move on. Again, I don't want us to be a stepping stone, but I think there's a level of he gets a lot of criticism, Kieran Scott, but I think you have to also praise him because we're getting these players for a duration of time regardless.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even though you're sort of saying that you don't want us to be a stepping stone, I think where you look at where we are in the food chain at the minute, being a championship club and trying to progress, being in the situation that we are, signing good players, good young players to give them the opportunity to either play in England for the first time or get some game time. Usually, if they've come out of a Premier League side or a Premier League academy, come into Middlesbrough, getting that experience before them being able to move on and progress is really good and obviously stands you in good stead for the future. But just on the Milanda deal, again, to just go back a little bit, I think it is a hell of a lot of money to invest in a centre half, especially in an area that at the minute we're currently quite well stocked in, I suppose. When you look at Ealing now, I'd class him as a centre half,
Yeah,
really.
yeah,
Fry, Edmondson, Jones. Borges, and obviously Darragh Lenihan. But looking at that, you have six centre halves there on the books. Lenihan out of contract at the end of the season, Ayling out of contract at the end of the season, Dale Fry out of contract at the end of the season. Like, I'm under no illusion that I think at least one of those will get a new deal, but investing in a young centre half, giving him a 5.5 year deal, half a year to cover him for the half that he's going to be available for this season, but a 5 year deal for the future is really important. And obviously, if he gets off to a really good start or plays well in his opening year, opening 18 months, opening 2 years of that Middlesbrough deal, it stands you in good stead to even sell him again because you'll have another 3 years left on his deal. So it's really good to have him tied in. And fingers crossed we'll see him in January and he's fit and firing and ready to go.
Yeah, he really does look an exciting addition. I think one that Rob Edwards is probably inwardly a little bit sort of annoyed that he can't sort of get his hands on him a little bit earlier. But I'm sure by, I think you said is it Derby away, Pride Park? It'll be sort of first game of availability. So we'll wait and see. I'm just crossing everything he stays fit because, typical Borough and all that. But yeah, all the best with the rest of the MLS campaign and whatever playoff Charlotte find themselves in and things like that. On a sort of whole different scale to the signing of Milanda, we did also get more or less confirmation that Middlesbrough are at least set to complete the loan signing for the season of Matt Targett from Newcastle. Very much different ends of the spectrum in terms of experience and the type of deal that it is. Interestingly, obviously, there's a sort of additional arm to this signing in the fact that Middlesbrough have acted because they weren't able to get Max Staffson out of Columbus Crew. I think interestingly, it's very much been reported, and it's also, from our understanding, something that Middlesbrough may well look at again in the future. It's certainly not a case of we can't have him now, we've moved on. I think with that taken into consideration, that might be something that we go back for. And also just what we need in terms of the here and now. Again, I'm going to praise Kieran Scott and the recruitment team because for me, I look at Matt Targett as a signing and I get straight away people are bringing up his fitness record and how sort of many games he's played over the last year and a bit. But this shows adaptability, and we always talk about it in terms of head coaches and the managerial staff adapting to situations. I think with any club signing players or getting down their list of targets, of course you'll have a shortlist, but you've got to be able to adapt. If one situation doesn't go your way, you have to be able to pivot. And Middlesbrough have done that, and most importantly, very quickly. Once it became apparent that Arston was done, more or less, I think it was on the day that the MLS window closed, it was breaking news. Middlesbrough are signing Matt Targett. I know for a fine fact, because we've already discussed it, that you're quite happy with this one. And I think what has been ignored a little bit in terms of just touching on his fitness record, Matt Targett was more or less available all of last season. Unfortunately for him, he was playing in a team chasing down a spot in the Champions League and had two England internationals ahead of him at left back. So I think, obviously, from where I am in the country, a lot of my friends are big Newcastle fans. They are very much of the opinion that Matt Targett could play in the Premier League. He's been slightly unfortunate. Other than an eczema flare up, he has been available. It's not a case of muscle injuries, and I know people have talked about the Achilles injury, but he has been for the most part available. He just couldn't get in the Newcastle team. So he's played in pre-season. I'm sure, obviously, he needs a little bit more game time to get fully up to speed, but someone that I think, I said this to you, if Chris Wilder was at Sheffield United and Matt Targett signed on loan, you'd go, he's just going to be good, isn't he? He'll just be steady Eddie, 7 out of 10. He'll do a job and it'll work. And because Middlesbrough have signed him, again, I think it's a bit of Iheanacho syndrome where slightly older player on loan from a Premier League club, everyone's a bit scared on how it's going to go. I honestly think this will be a sensible addition and a good one as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's not much that can go wrong with a signing like this. A player who has experience at the top level over a sustained period of time. He's played in the Championship at a couple of intervals in his career, and obviously he's been in sides that have been top sides for the level in Fulham, most notably, really. And I think despite not playing for a couple of years, it's no sort of skin off his back, really, with Lewis Hall, Tino Livramento, Kieran Trippier, Dan Burn all playing ahead of him in that left back position at times. But we are in need of a player to play in either a left wing back or a left back position if we choose to alter system at any point that is just slightly more natural as a left-sided defender. And he's left-footed rather than Silvera, who's more, well, he is right-footed and wants to chop in and deliver crosses. Targett offers you more being able to get to the byline, I suppose. And obviously, he's a competent defender as well. He is a sensible signing. He is one that, if you looked at any other Championship club, as you say, that's made this signing, you'd say, yeah, solid addition. Won't drop below a 7 out of 10 in most games across a season. So I'm really sort of pleased that they've made an addition like this. I think one thing that can sort of skew a fan's opinion is that they see the link to Arfston and see a couple of clips of him in the MLS, and obviously he's an unknown quantity. He's definitely more attacking than defensive in terms of being an out and out wing back. Whereas Targett, it's not the most attractive signing in the world in terms of his name, but he's an experienced fullback in England that knows the Championship, is probably a little bit too good for the division, really. I think he could do a job in the Premier League at most squads, really,
Yeah.
filling in at left back. So yeah, really sort of pleased if we can get that one over the line, just to have another body in there to play left back, even if it is a loan deal and a sort of a short term option and a short term fix there.
Yeah, I think what's really crucial, and you've seen it from Middlesbrough's success and all other clubs in this division, in the Championship, if you're going to be anywhere near the top, usually you've got to utilise the Premier League loan market a couple of times. And I think this one will prove to be something that is definitely Middlesbrough being able to do that well. On to the last bit of incoming transfer news. This was one actually broken by ourselves, Nathan, on Saturday morning before the Norwich game. We had a little bit of an inkling that this may have kind of been bubbling away in the background during the week through a very sort of funny turn of events, really. But in terms of the situation and what Middlesbrough are getting, it certainly seems, because there was a little bit of social media speculation a while back that basically this player, Kaly Sène, I'm going to go with, I hope I haven't butchered his name, but I'm sure we'll find out very soon how it's actually pronounced correctly. But there was that little bit of social media speculation regarding, are Middlesbrough interested in a move? From our kind of perspective, it was a case that at that point in the window when his name first cropped up, there was actually no sort of concrete movement going on. It wasn't a player that Middlesbrough were trying to sign. The situation's obviously changed more recently. Of course, there was the interest in Sabali that was being reported in the French media. That one seems to have been moved on from. Unfortunately for Sabali, he seems to now be doing an Alexander Isak and be on strike, but I think Middlesbrough have moved on from that and they've targeted Sene. And by all accounts, again, like with Milanda, have managed to sort of fend off interest from a lot of top European clubs to get this one over the line. Of course, previously, Sene was part of the Juventus Academy. Looks like he's had a really good start to this season, and from clips and the highlights that you see, certainly looks like a player that is going to offer you a different profile to that of Tommy Conway. A lot more physical, even in terms of stature, and someone that's, I think, going to be a really exciting addition, to be honest.
Yeah, again, another sort of unknown quantity, really,
Yeah,
with not a lot of fans knowing of him, really, and just sort of going off clips that we've seen. Me and you were the same in that sort of regard. But from everything that I've seen, as you say, 6'2", bit more of a physical player compared to Tommy Conway. But as you said, this season he's got off to a really good start. Spent most of his career in Switzerland, playing for Grasshopper Zurich, Basel, and now Lausanne. And I think what's really sort of caught my eye as well, knowing that the way that we've pressed in the opening couple of games, is that for the Swiss division, like I'm not so sure if there is too many comparisons. Obviously, the last player that we signed from the Swiss division was Emmanuel Latte, but his Senes, that is, his recoveries and possession won in the final third, a top of any sort of player in the division. Really good presser, and looking at the way that we want to play, that's sort of a player that I think would be earmarked as a good signing for us to be able to offer us a little bit of something different up there at the top of the pitch. I've noticed that he likes to drift into that left channel, same as Conway.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, just going off sort of the little things that I've seen, but I think that he could be a really sort of interesting signing that we're going to make.
So in terms of incomings, obviously Nathan, there's plenty bubbling away, and it looks like Sene and Targett will be confirmed at some point this week, perhaps even later on today. So if they have been announced by the time this podcast is uploaded, then we're recording it on Monday morning, so do forgive us. In terms of outgoing transfer news, obviously the biggest kind of story of the week, if you will, in that regard, is of course the interest in Finn Azaz. Southampton have made a bid of, it said initially when the reports come out from the Mail, in the region of 12 million. Now, since Dom has obviously added a little bit more context to this situation, it's not been reported as such in terms of what the first bid from Southampton was that was rejected, but it was that if they basically get close to that 12 million figure, that Middlesbrough would be probably reluctantly open to sell. There's been a lot of conversation about, well, 12 million is not enough. It hasn't quite been cleared up if it's 12 million plus add-ons. So, there's a bit of a conversation around that. Firstly, obviously, would you be, I don't want to say open to the move, but do you think if it was a case of Hackney or Azaz, what's your stance on that perspective? And also, we'll move on to the fact that he has played and obviously scored in the Norwich game. So that kind of adds a little bit of extra something into it as well, because, he's not doing an Isak here. I think by all accounts he is keen on the move, but he's certainly not kicking up a fuss or anything like that at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, definitely. That all the talk all summer has been about, well, we're going to have to sell at least one of Rav and or Hayden Hackney.
Yeah.
Obviously, Rav's out the door, Hayden Hackney staying, and then the next bid that comes in is for Finn Azaz. And you think, oh yeah, forgot about Finn Azaz, that players might want a player that's contributed to over 20 goals in his last, well, in his last two and only two seasons in the Championship. He's contributed to over 20 goals in both of those seasons at two different clubs. So you're thinking, yeah, forgot about that actually. And obviously, he hasn't played all too much this season, having come back from injury just ahead of the Millwall game. Came off the bench, set a goal up. Obviously, we'll get on to Norwich in a little bit later, but obviously, we know that he started that game and scored the goal to get us in front. But I think that, and look, it's all hypothetical because we don't know the financial situation of the football club. But if it was a toss up between you have to sell one of Azaz or Hackney, I think most of the fan base, 99% of the fan base, would say sell Finn Azaz. And I think that from my view, most people know that I am a big fan of Finn Azaz, and I have been pretty much since he joined the football club. He has his moments where he can be frustrating, which
I think you saw perfectly in the Norwich game, to be honest.
literally, yeah, that was a typical Finn Azaz performance, really. He has his moments where he frustrates with misplaced passes, sometimes making the wrong decision, and then he'll still end the game and he's contributed to a goal, whether it's in a win or a defeat. He usually contributes something in a game. I think that heading into the Norwich game, especially, I was thinking, well, if you lose your number one creative player in a team that in the first game of the season especially we struggle to create any chances really from open play, then losing him would be a massive sort of dent. But it looks like we are prioritising attacking midfield or winger or second striker positions heading into the final week of the window now. And for £12 million, I think, look, it's a fair price with it being the last week of the window and you're selling to a team in the same division who you know are also in talks to sell two of their young players, Diblin and Fernandez, for £30 million, if not more a piece. You you could probably drive a harder bargain and say 15. We'll call it at 15 if you really want him. You're desperate because you're selling these players to teams in the top flight. You're desperate for an attacking midfielder. Go on then. If you really want a player that's going to contribute you 20 goals a season, pay the 15 million quid. But it looks like they're going to settle on 12. It looks like Azaz sort of wants to move, but again, he remains professional in his actions, not kicking up a fuss, as you say. Played the game on Saturday and obviously contributed to another win for Boro. But I think that at some point in the season, if Finn Azaz does go, we'll probably be sat on this podcast saying, oh, could do with someone like Finn Azaz to unlock a door or chip in with a goal.
Yeah, I think obviously we discussed it on numerous occasions last season. He is one of those players where it's undoubted that he's got a lot of talent. Obviously, there is a conversation around, sometimes he goes missing in games, sometimes he'll give the ball away 10 times, but then get an assist with his 11th attempted pass. And that's kind of the frustration that some people have with him. I know I'm not disputing and saying that's wrong because I know I've been there. I was on numerous occasions on the podcast last season. Maybe a bit of an argument about him being a flat track bully, but regardless, it's hard to replace any amount of goals and assists of that tally in whatever level of football. That is ultimately why strikers and forwards get paid the most amount of money in teams. And yeah, I think for me, again, it's difficult, and you are correct completely in the sense of we are looking at this from a hypothetical perspective with no real idea on do Middlesbrough need to sell both? Would they be open to sell both? Would they sell one and then basically say, well, if one of you goes, the other one definitely isn't. It's so difficult to look at it, but I think judging from, and this was also in the Mail report, that basically should Finn Azaz be sold, that the club would be very, very determined that they would then not lose Hayden Hackney. Now, if West Ham, for example, they seem to be cropping up their name a lot with Hackney today, it could quite well be the case that West Ham panic. And it wouldn't surprise me at all because they're run like a bit of a basket case. They go, right, well, Ipswich had a 20 million deal agreed. We'll put 25 on the table for him. And then the club are like, kind of, well, we would really want a premium for someone of that ability who's been absolutely integral to starting the season with 3 wins out of 3. Homegrown academy talent, it's pure profit on the books from a PSR perspective. You do kind of think, well, they may, again, going back to the model, think that might set us up for 2 or 3 more seasons. It's really difficult. Personally, I would be absolutely devastated if Hayden Hackney was to be sold. I think certainly if both of them went, it would tell you a lot about Middlesbrough's ambitions, judging from their start to the season and the way that Steve Gibson kind of views our potential of competing up there this season. If you sell both, I think regardless of what you bring in, it does feel like you would be almost announcing without announcing that we are, there's no doubt about it, we're a selling club, but it would be a sign of intent in the opposite way that you want from your football club, that if the price is right, we're going to sell, and we're not really going to, regardless of if we've sold two or three, we're just going to sell the assets, and it's about profit rather than actually competing in this division. So, look, I don't want to go down that route too much because nothing's happened yet. So we'll kind of look at that next week, I'm sure, when hopefully they're both still here. But I think we should, unless there's anything else that you kind of urgently want to add, move on and talk about Norwich and talk about those two players being excellent in the game and contributing to another fantastic away win.
Yeah, just literally quickly. I think if Azaz goes, Hackney stays. But I think there's a lot to be said about the ambition of the football club because it needs to be said that a bid was accepted for Hayden Hackney this window.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
So this obviously
I think the
here at the minute,
yeah, timing is the big one for this. I
yeah,
think.
exactly. I agree with you on that point, and I think so late in the window now, I don't think a £20 million bid would be accepted for Hayden Hackney, especially with time ticking down. We're now on Monday. I think there's a window a close a
It's
week today.
next Monday. Yeah,
Closes a week today, and with every second that ticks by, that price has to be ticking up
yeah,
for us to even consider selling him because that means that we'd have to replace him as well with someone adequately. And again, to sign players this late in the window for a team that if we then sold Hackney, teams know that we're desperate to replace him. They charge a harder bargain, and we're overpaying for someone who's nowhere near the level because I think he's honestly irreplaceable for what he brings to this Borough team, as we've seen in the games so far this season, and now on to Saturday, in which him and his midfield partner were both absolutely fantastic.
yeah. They absolutely were. In terms of obviously the starting team, who we've just discussed, Finn Azaz replaced Abdoulaye Kante, and I think honestly going into this game, when you get on a bit of a winning run, you do have that little bit of, well, yeah, we might win this game. But I was fully expecting that this might be the game where, look, we're only 3 games in still, but I was thinking, well, I'd probably still snap your hand off for a point. And I think early on, and what is so crucial in this first half, and I think particularly where the game began to change, was a moment actually of where you think, oh dear, Solbrin's gone down. He's holding his shoulder. And then you see that bench and the backroom staff incredibly keen to get the players over. And I'm not saying it's tactical. I think Solbrin genuinely probably has tweaked his shoulder. Thankfully, he continued the rest of the game. But it did give us a moment right at that point. It felt like almost like a pinpoint of in the highlights at this exact moment there was that slight tweak in formation and it really got there had been moments before this where Middlesbrough had looked good in their press. Norwich, I felt, especially Cordoba and their goalkeeper, looked a bit of a bomb scare in all honesty. There was passes that were too short, passes being cut out, taking too long on the ball, and as you say, I'm sure we'll wax lyrical about them going throughout this analysis of the game. But Hayden Hackney and Aidan Morris, the pair of them, were like two pit bulls in midfield all game. They were just relentless in their press and were getting so much joy whenever Norwich try to play out from the back.
Yeah, quite literally. There was a couple of chances early on. Sargent had one. Whitaker, the ball got sort of squared to him, I think a bit fortunately by Azaz, and he just sort of was falling backwards and couldn't get his balance right and be able to get a shot away. Couple of moments early on there, but then, as you say, the goalkeeper and Cordoba especially were terrible, really, on the ball. There was the instance in which he passed it to Morris, and he tried to dink it over the keeper into the back of the net, but just sort of over knocks it, and it goes over the bar. But then, yeah, the keeper comes out a few moments later, heads the ball into midfield, and Hackney reads that right pass. and steps in, nicks the ball, plays it into Morris, into Conway, all one touch, round the corner, into Whitaker, takes a couple of touches, drives inside, plays it to Hackney, and the pitch is wide open. He has options right, but there are a couple of Norwich bodies, and Azaz is left. You're sort of expecting him to shift it on his right foot and bend it, but instead he chops in left foot, takes a little nick, and yeah, into the near post, and it's a really sort of well worked, efficient goal in which we press really well, win the ball back, and in a couple of passes we've carved them open and got ourselves an opportunity to get at them and give ourselves the lead, which we do. And then Azaz blowing kisses to the Norwich fans, I think that'll be used as a meme in the week when he's blowing kisses to the Boro fans as well.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I said during the game as I was watching it, once I'd finished my celebration, I said, "Oh God, I hope that doesn't come back to haunt us." And I know we joked about it last week in terms of the character of this team to go and do that and then risk kind of being, completely mocked for it post match. I just hope I didn't think about it at that point. I hope this isn't used as a complete meme to just basically take the piss out of us that he's joined Southampton. But yeah, we'll wait and see on that one. But yeah, you're right. Fantastically worked transition, a high turnover. He always talks about turnovers, Rob Edwards. That is exactly what I saw in pre-season, especially in the Rangers game, where I actually felt, do you know what? I'm liking the look of this. And look, we're still very, very early on. I almost want to kind of keep on re-emphasizing that. But it is impressive, bearing in mind the passive nature to Middlesbrough under Michael Carrick last season, that Rob Edwards has had this much of an impact, and Adi and Harry Watling, so quickly. Because those goals we saw a few times in pre-season, or those moments where we would win it back high up the pitch and not quite make that final pass or not quite get that final shot off, we've seen a few times in almost each of the games, less so against Swansea, that if teams are going to believe their own hype and try and be clever about things and be one of these modern day play out from the back, even if you don't have the players to do it, Middlesbrough will be able to punish you. And it's what the second goal comes from again. That pair, Hayden Hackney and Aidan Morris, like absolute terriers. I was trying to think of a different dog breed this time. I can't remember which. I think I said two pit bulls. Basically, just two absolute dogs in midfield that are constantly nipping away at your ankles, and you think, well, you just leave me alone. The pair of them, not only are they great at that, they've also got some excellent quality. And I think the two key sort of element of this goal is just as Cordoba almost recovers a little bit out wide on the right, Hayden Hackney slides it just past him. And to be honest, at that point, I thought Cordoba might get his leg in here. Hayden Hackney just slides it just perfectly, just past him, enough for Aidan Morris to continue his run. And it looks like the easiest finish in the world, and yes, I'm sure Tommy Conway has scored more difficult goals, but he's in the right place at the right time, gets his reward for all of the off the ball work that he does in this moment. Norwich's number 5 just completely backs off and allows Tommy Conway so much room to tap the ball in. But I do think you've also got to give Aiden credit. Aiden credit. Aidan Morris immense credit for this one, because he waits and waits and waits and almost allows Norwich to be their own biggest downfall, because he allows the idiocy of Norwich's defenders to back off and back off and back off, and then just picks the perfect pass out, and Morris just slides it across to Conway to tap in. And I think in this celebration you could really see how much it meant to Tommy Conway, because he's done so much work off the ball, as I say, for him to get on the score sheet. I think it'll be a really big moment for Tommy Conway this season.
yeah, I think he spoke in his press conference at the end of the final pre-season game, in which he said, "I'm going to have to work really hard, but we're going to try and create opportunities which are just sort of cutbacks, and I just have to score the tap-ins." And that was one of those, I think, probably for the first time this season, where we've actually had an opportunity where it is someone getting to the byline, delivering a cross, and Conway's in the 6 yard box, just able to tap it in. But yeah, it was really good to get those 2 goals just before half time. Set you up really, really nicely in what was an even first half. And yeah, going into the break 2-0 up was very nice, especially given just before this point, Norwich did have a little spell. Diallo was causing us a little bit of trouble on the left-hand side. He had an effort that sort of went just wide of the top corner a little bit earlier on, but 2-0 up at half time, you're in dreamland and you're just sort of hoping that they can come out in the second half, possibly make a couple of changes, get Hansen on and Bergzor, give you a little bit of pace on the break to sort of counter in a half where you're expecting to defend a little bit more, but the game then changes again 10 minutes into the second half with Jacob Wright waving goodbye and giving kisses to the Norwich fans as well as Azaz.
Yeah, to be honest, in terms of this one, I don't think we even need to dissect it. If you've seen the tackle, it's almost a double red. He could have got three different red cards for this one. He's high, out of control, it's reckless. It's a definite red card. I even think the Norwich fans would concede that one. So, yeah, as you say, it does obviously change. Just in terms of the point about, I know I was waffling on about Solbrin going down, but we did what I enjoyed, particularly in the second half and first half, a few times transition between a 3-4-2-1 and 3-5-2. I do think we'll see more of that as we get more bodies incoming. Again, even in the second half, there was a few times where we almost flicked between the two. Whitaker kind of played off Conway and Azaz tucked in a little bit more. And in the second half, to be honest, there was not really, for me at least, of course, it's different when you're watching the game live and you've got all your different emotions. But having watched the highlights back, extended highlights for a second and third time, there was actually a few Norwich chances, but at the time I just didn't really feel sort of that concerned by any of it. We obviously brought Hansen and Bergzorg on and they were beginning to have an impact on the game, but right before Norwich do get themselves back into the game, and obviously that's very late on, we have a couple of really good chances. Hansen goes close and forces the keeper into a good save. But I think the major talking point before those, what felt like about an hour of added time, was of course Nypan going through. And it's easy to say now. I think if he shoots and misses, you go, why didn't he square it? I'll say on this one, I think he makes the right decision, but potentially just slightly delays it a bit too long, which almost takes Aidan Morris by surprise. And then obviously Norwich just kind of hit us when we're least expecting it, really, and it causes a few to get caught out, Silvera in particular. But yeah, I felt really quite comfortable in the game, as I had done even at Millwall, really, once we got the second especially, and even Swansea again. That back three, and I think just giving credit to them, Luke Ayling, Alfie Jones, Dale Fry. And I thought, especially in this game, I thought it was Callum Britton's best game in a Middlesbrough shirt, considering he was up against an absolute box of tricks and probably Norwich's best player, especially in the first half, in Diallo. I thought Callum Britton dealt with him very, very well because he didn't really get much of a sniff, particularly in the second half. But that back line, they just give you that feeling of safety. I mean, yeah, okay, we're undone, but it's one ball, and again, we'll pick out Silvera's part in this goal. But they had a couple of pot shots, and as you say, there was a few sort of chances where it goes wide. But you know, even at 2-0, you never felt absolute. It wasn't the complete Alamo.
No, it wasn't. I think obviously the knee pan chance and then getting hit with a sucker punch straight away is a massive blow, really.
Yeah,
It felt like with 5 minutes to go plus added time, and we knew that there'd be quite a lot of added time as well for Jack Stacey going down, and then obviously the red card incident as well. Those we knew that there was going to be quite a lot of stoppage time at the end of the game, but yeah, it's a frustrating one to concede. Obviously, Topic gets the ball and plays a ball over the top. I think our back line sort of shifts a little bit. Alfie Jones steps up into midfield, sort of maybe anticipating a punched ball forward. And what was usually the case all day, and to be fair, it's been all season so far, was centre forwards and the targeting of Sammy Silvera, either centre forwards pulling off and sort of being in that channel alongside him, not knowing where he needs to be in certain instances, and with Jones stepping up, who's usually the man to either win the ball in the air alongside Silvera and give him a little bit of a hand in there. Jones steps up, the ball's lobbed over his head, and obviously Sargent, I think it's fair to say he's the best number 9 in the division, isn't he? And
Yeah,
he gets his body in the way, sort of just muscles off Silvera. The ball is still travelling, and Solbrin tries to come out, but Sargent with a neat and tidy finish just sort of dinks it over his head and into the back of the net, and it leaves a little bit of a nervy last 10 minutes on the clock. But I thought that we did okay. I mean, granted, you're playing against 10 men, but after that point, I thought we did okay. A couple of instances where we looked a little bit too composed in midfield. Morris made a couple of errors in midfield, and then Norwich are transitioning forward. But there was a couple of instances where some of our attacking players just sort of pulled them back, and you just take a foul, take a yellow card. Nypan, I think, just sort of like grabbed Sargent's shorts at one point and pulled him back. Yeah, I think we need to be a little bit more nasty in moments like that, and it was good to see us being more nasty, stopping the game, stopping the flow, stopping Norwich gaining any sort of momentum for the final 5 minutes. I thought that was really pleasing.
especially I know uh, he's certainly, he's just been bought by Manchester City for 12.5 million, and it's not for pulling people's shorts back. But in terms of an age thing, and obviously that being his first ever game in English football in the Championship, that almost pleased me more than some of his really nice touches and how comfortable he looked on both feet. Because signing loan players, you expect a certain level of technical ability, but it's also that just understanding of when things need to be done and doing that. And as you say, stopping the momentum, stopping the attack. I was almost like, right, okay, yeah, he knows what he's doing straight away, which was pleasing in a strange sense.
Yeah, and I think really the only sort of talking points following that Sargent goal was a ball up the side from Britain. Their keeper again. Dear me, he made a really good save last week in their game against Portsmouth, and it made me think, oh, he looks like a good addition for them. But if these teams, I mean, look, we've fallen foul of it over the last couple of years with keepers that sort of are prioritised for being better with the feet than they are being an actual goalkeeper. When realistically, if you look at Manchester City, who everyone's copying, Edison is a world class goalkeeper and shot stopper, but he's also really good with his feet. They aren't sacrificing one thing for the other. But anyway, that's me sort of agenda with goalkeepers. Yeah, this goalkeeper just passes the ball to Hayden Hackney. A little bit more of a difficult chance to the Morris one in the first half. Yeah, from then on, there was the corner with about 30 seconds left to play, and they were all giving it handballs, and it was a little bit nervy. We're sort of sat in your living room
Oh
panicking
yeah,
a
it's
little bit.
it's it's easy to sort of smile and say, "Oh, I was a bit nervy." I mean, me and Nathan were both like clutching onto our hearts at the time, to be honest. So yeah, I think, in fairness, as I say, when you take the emotion out of it and think back to how it was now and look at the highlights, we actually did quite well. We made it a little bit scruffy, more so than we needed to, but I still, to be honest, and I don't want to make this like a common thing. I feel like under Michael Carrick, we somehow just draw that game or lose it, which I'm seeing as a positive because we didn't in this occasion. We stood strong and kept our lead, even though we did have it reduced and concede for the first time. So I'm sure Solbrin will be furious that he lost his clean sheet as well as the defenders. But yeah, look, you have to take the results for what they are. Incredibly early, but 3 wins out of three. Our best start, I'm reading now, since the 94-95 season. Only won 3 games in a row once last season as well, going back to Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough. You can't say anything more than it's going fantastically well at the moment. And you go into that Sheffield United game, who have almost been the shock of the season so far, and think if you can get another win under your belt going into the first international break of the season, it's almost dreamland, really.
Yeah, it's been an absolutely tremendous start to the season, and fair play to Rob Edwards. Looking at the start of the season, and you see Sheffield United in the first month, you think, well, a little bit of an unknown one with Sellés going there and our mate Wilder getting the tin tack, which now, looking at that, it looks like everything that Sheffield United were and have an identity for, which is being hard to play against, tough, nasty, but also complemented with attacking quality and just being defensively resilient, has all gone to pot a little bit since Ruben Sellés has gone in the door. And I think from the outside looking in, the fans are wearing thin a little bit. Fingers crossed that can continue for another week, and Boro can put Ruben Sellés right under it
Yeah.
for the first international
I
break.
mean, that's if he's not already, to be honest. And I
Yeah,
think, like we managed, and what was a really, I think, regardless of whatever happens this season, we'll look back and think that that first home win under Rob Edwards was a really poignant moment in terms of just the swing of momentum, the swing of people saying, "All right, we've not looked amazing, but we've done a job. We've been resilient, and we've won a game through a set piece." And immediately fans are kind of on board, and those who weren't sure are a little bit leaning towards, oh well, I might be able to get on board with this. And then of course you've got to follow it up. But in terms of Sheffield United, as you say, obviously they have their first game of the season, very well beaten by, Bristol City are a good side, but to concede that many goals at home at any stage of the season, but on your kind of introduction to your new look Sheffield United team, they're immediately off on the wrong foot. And in a kind of complete polar opposite sense to us, our momentum has swung us one way and kind of put us on this little run. Sheffield United's opening performance of the season seems to have been, well, basically done that the other way. They'll be one of the clubs which are quite busy in the final week, so you might see kind of three or four of their back line potentially completely different to the one that plays even on Saturday when it gets to our game against them in the early kickoff. I think obviously the fact when you talk about Sheffield United of old, the mix of being well organised and well structured, but having those top attacking players, Gus Hamer, regardless of who he's playing for, at what level, is someone that Middlesbrough have struggled against time and time again. I don't think it's only Middlesbrough that must be said that struggle against Gus Hamer. He's one of the best players in this division by a significant distance. And to be totally honest, it's one of those games where you almost feel a little bit blindsided and think, well, surely we can't be going into this game based off the fact that Sheffield United were favourites in the playoff final last season and we were drab and our season was done and dusted weeks before their playoff final. But actually, we're going into this game as favourites, and it's something that, although we're 3 games in, and especially it changes the dynamics being at home where really you're expected to be the team on the front foot and take the game to Sheffield United, a different type of performance and hopefully a different type of win for Middlesbrough, where I'm guessing, and they may not, but I'm more expecting Sheffield United and Ruben Sellés to look at this as an opportunity to change tact a little bit and perhaps sit in and invite Middlesbrough on. I think that'll be a really interesting judgment for our supporters and Rob Edwards in terms of, you mentioned the different attacking talents that we're going to potentially bring in, obviously in and out, very much still up in the air with a few different situations. But this is why you've got to have a squad and different attacking players, because you can't just rely on winning the ball dead high. Sheffield United might, I'm not saying that they will. They might just go, right, we're going to play along into Tyrese Campbell and play off him and try and almost bypass the press. So I'm looking forward to it, but it's a really interesting one because we're ultimately going into this game as favourites against Sheffield United.
Yeah, and it's as you say, it's like a top v bottom of the form guide, which is obviously at this stage of the season, it's usually us stinking the gaff out. So it's a little bit of a shock that it is this way around. And again, you do sort of expect that at some stage it will swing back the pendulum, and Sheffield United will revert back to sort of what they are, which is a really good side with really good individuals. And you're looking at that team, and that can't last forever. You can't create loads of chances in games, have loads of good opportunities, and either not score in games or not pick up points, really. And fingers crossed it does continue for another week against Middlesbrough at the Riverside. But yeah, players like Gustavo Hamer, Championship Player of the Season last year, Tyrese Campbell, top striker at this level, Barry, who we were sort of linked with in every paper, but noticeably weren't really linked properly. And yeah, they've got a couple of decent players. Do expect them to make additions through the week, but yeah, I think really from their point of view as well, they will not tolerate another defeat, especially because of the way in which new owners have came at the football club and sacked one of their own who surpassed 90 points. It will change at some point. Fingers crossed. Super Rob Edwards, handsome, sexy football, pressing Reds, set piece Reds do the biz again and make it 4 out of 4 heading into the first international break, because it has caught me by surprise the way that we've been able to adapt so quickly into the way that he wants to play and the way that he's instilled a certain mentality amongst these players so far, in which when they face a setback like they did against Doncaster, and they sort of have a mentality of, oh, this will be easy. Nothing ever comes easy to successful teams, ever. And since that Doncaster game, they've bounced back and they've put into really, really good performances away from home at difficult places. And the fans will be right behind them on Saturday. They deserve rewarding for the performances that they're putting away from home. And fingers crossed they can do that again, because in the opening pod of the season, the preview, I said we'd be lucky to get 5 points out of 12 for the first 4 games. And we've currently got 9 points out of 9. But I don't want that to end. I don't want that to end yet. Let's keep going. Let's keep ticking on, playing these big sides in this division, keep churning the points over, and see where we can end up before a first defeat that will probably come at some point.
Yeah, we're just riding kind of this. I said during the week, we're just riding a wave at the moment, not really knowing how long this is going to last for, but enjoying every moment of it. So, yeah, let's hope it continues, as you say. Yeah, in terms of obviously next week's podcast, I think would probably may well do it maybe it's a couple of days actually into the international break, just because it kind of makes no sense for us to record on Sunday when transfer deadline day is Monday night. So you can expect that one slightly later than usual, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday night perhaps. But other than that, yeah, we'll be back next week and hopefully talking about Hayden Hackney still being here and another Middlesbrough win. But of course, it's the transfer window, so a lot can change. Yeah, as always, Nathan, thank you very much for your time on this bank holiday Monday. Thank you for again all the support, especially on YouTube. The sort of all of the figures have shot right up, so we do appreciate that, and of course, audio listeners as well. You can like the video, leave a comment by all means. What would you like to see happen in the remainder of this window? And of course, subscribe on all our different platforms and keep an eye on the socials for any transfer news over the next week and a bit. So yes, thanks again for watching. We're enjoying this wave that we're on, and hopefully it'll continue into the next week and next podcast. Thanks again, and that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast.